One night, he felt tired in a deeper way. Not pain, just a gentle signal that rests mattered more now. He accepted it without fear. He had lived fully in the quiet spaces. Before sleeping, he placed the letters and notes together one last time. He did not hide them carefully this time. He placed them where they could be found. Trust had carried him this far. He believed it would carry the story forward. Outside, the streetlights glowed softly. The car rested under its cover, still and patient. He closed his eyes. Calm and certain. Some lives teach loudly. Others teach by being lived well. His had done both in its own quiet way. The morning came softly. Light entered the room without asking for attention, touching the walls, the floor, the quiet corners where time had settled. He woke slowly, aware of his breath, aware of the stillness around him. There was no sense of hurry, no sense of fear. Only a calm understanding that everything he needed had already been lived. He sat up and listened. The street outside was awake, but gentle. A door closing somewhere, footsteps passing, a distant sound of conversation. Life continuing, just as it always had. He made his tea and stood by the window longer than usual. His reflection looked older now, but not tired. The lines on his face felt earned. Each one carried a choice, a moment. A lesson accepted rather than avoided. The covered car was still there. He smiled. It was strange how something once mocked had become such a quiet anchor, not because it was special, but because of what it had taught him to see. How many other things had he once overlooked in life simply because they did not shine at first glance? Later that day, he stepped outside and took a slow walk. People greeted him warmly. Some waved, some stopped. A few simply nodded with respect. He felt no need to hold on to these gestures, but he accepted them as signs that connection had been made. Near the end of the street, he paused to rest. A bench waited there, worn smooth by years of use. Sat and watched the world move around him. Children laughed. Someone argued briefly, then laughed too. Life was imperfect and still beautiful. A young person sat beside him after a while. They did not speak at first. Silence passed easily between them. Finally, the young person asked how he had learned to live so calmly. He thought for a moment. He said he had stopped trying to prove anything. That answer seemed to settle something. When he returned home, he felt tired, but it was a good tired. He sat near the car and gently removed the cover, letting the air touch its surface again. His hand rested on the metal. It was cool and familiar. He remembered the laughter. He remembered the shame. He remembered the letter most of all. He remembered the choice to stay. As evening approached, neighbors gathered nearby for a small moment together. Nothing planned, just people sharing food, stories, quiet joy. He joined them, listening more than speaking, content to simply be there. As night settled, he returned inside. He placed the letters, the notes, and the documents together one final time. Not hidden, not protected, just present. He trusted what came next. Before sleeping, he looked once more at the car through the window. It stood quietly, as it always had. He closed his eyes with a steady heart in the days that followed. People noticed his absence before they fully understood it. The street felt different, not empty, but changed. The quiet he had carried now lingered, asking others to step into it. Someone found the letters. They read slowly. They understood. The car remained where it was for a time, cared for by many hands. It was no longer one person's inheritance. It belonged to the story now. People spoke of him without sadness. They spoke with gratitude. They spoke of patience. They spoke of kindness without reward. And somewhere, quietly, the lesson continued. Not every life needs applause. Some lives change the world by showing others how to stand steady. His did exactly that. The days after he was gone unfolded slowly. As if the street itself was learning how to breathe without him, nothing stopped. People still went to work. Children still played. Doors still opened and closed. Yet something gentle had shifted. Something hard to explain, but easy to feel. The car remained where it had always been. Covered, quiet, steady. It had not moved in a long time, but now it felt more present than ever. People walked past it with softer steps. Some touched the cover briefly, like one might touch a shoulder in passing. Inside the nearby homes, conversations changed. His name came up often, not with sadness alone, but with reflection. People remembered small moments, advice given without pressure, help offered without conditions, silence shared without discomfort. One neighbor recalled a time when everything felt like it was falling apart, and how a short conversation with him had made it feel manageable again. Another remembered a ride given late at night, no questions asked. Someone else spoke about how he never hurried them, even when he was tired himself. These were not stories people usually tell loudly, but they were the ones that lasted. A few days later, someone opened the door to his place to sort through what remained. There was no rush. Everything was simple, clean, honest, nothing unnecessary, nothing hidden in fear. The letters were found just as he had left them. They were read slowly with care. The words did not command anything. They did not ask for praise or recognition. They spoke of patience, of listening, of carrying forward what matters quietly, without waiting for permission. The reader felt something settle inside them. They understood that this was not an ending. It was an invitation. Outside, the car became a point of gathering. Not officially. People simply found themselves there. Some stood quietly. Some spoke in low voices. Some said nothing at all. A decision was made together, without argument. The car would stay, not as an object of display, but as a reminder. Time moved forward again. New faces came to the street, unaware of the story at first. They noticed the car, they asked about it, and someone would always answer, not with the full story, but with enough they would say it belonged to someone who taught them how to slow down. That answer was usually enough to change the tone of the conversation. A child once asked why the car was never fixed or sold. An older neighbor replied that some things are not meant to be improved. They are meant to be understood. The child thought about that for a long time. As seasons passed, the street held on to what it had learned. People checked on each other more often. They listened a little longer. They judged a little less. No one claimed credit. That was the point. The car aged further. Rust deepened. The cover was replaced when it wore thin. Always quietly. Always together. One evening, as the sun set, someone placed fresh tea beside the car, just for a moment. Not for show, not for tradition, just because it felt right. The lesson continued, not in speeches, not in signs, but in how people chose to be with one another. And somewhere within that quiet, his presence remained, not as memory alone, but as habit, as choice, as a way of living that had proven itself strong enough to outlast a life. Some inherit objects, others inherit ways of seeing. That street had inherited both, and it carried them forward, one quiet day at a time. The quiet that followed did not feel empty. It felt settled, like a room after guests have left, but their warmth still lingers. People carried on with their lives, yet something gentle guided their choices now. They paused more. They listened longer. They remembered that patience could be stronger than force. The car stayed where it was, covered and cared for by many hands. It had become part of the rhythm of the place. No one argued about it. No one questioned it. It simply belonged. On some mornings, a few neighbors gathered nearby without planning it. They shared tea, simple food, and small talk. There was no leader. No one took credit. The habit had formed naturally, like water finding its path. A person new to the street once asked how it all started. The answer came from different mouths, each adding a small piece. No one told the whole story. They did not need to. The lesson lived in how they treated one another. Over time, a small box appeared near the car. Inside were notes. Short messages. Thanks. Apologies. Reflections written on scraps of paper. No one signed them. No one claimed them. The box filled slowly. Every so often, someone would read a note quietly and place it back. The act itself mattered more than the words. He never thought much about inheritance. To him, life had always been about getting through the day, paying bills on time, and keeping his head low. He worked a regular job, lived in a small rented place, and avoided attention whenever he could. When people talked about dreams or big plans, he usually stayed quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because experience had taught him that expecting too much only led to disappointment. The news of the death reached him on a dull afternoon. A short phone call, polite words, and an invitation he did not expect. He had not been close to the old man who passed away. They shared blood, yes, but not memories. The visits were rare, the conversations shorter than the drive it took to get there. Still, respect was respect, and he agreed to attend the small gathering where the belongings would be divided. The place felt colder than it should have. A few family members sat around whispering, checking their phones, already guessing what they might receive. Some spoke openly about land, others about savings, and a few joked about finally getting something useful. He sat near the back, hands folded, not thinking of gain. He only hoped it would be over quickly. When his turn came, the room barely reacted. The words were simple and clear. He was left an old car. Not a classic, not a collector's piece. Just a worn-out vehicle that had not moved in years. The air changed instantly. A few people laughed, trying to hide it. Others did not bother hiding it at all. Someone whispered that it was barely worth scrap metal. Another joked that at least he could sleep in it if things got worse. He felt his face grow warm, but he said nothing. He had learned long ago that defending himself only gave others more to laugh about. After the gathering, a distant relative walked up to him and asked if he planned to sell it right away. Another suggested a junkyard that paid fast. A third said he was lucky to get anything at all. He nodded politely, thanked them, and left. The car was parked behind an old building, covered in dust and dry leaves. Its paint had faded into a dull shade that no longer looked like it once had. The tires were half flat, and one side mirror was cracked. It looked tired, like it had been waiting for something that never came. He stood there longer than he meant to. Something about the car made him pause. Maybe it was the silence around it, or the way it seemed forgotten by everyone except him. He opened the door slowly. The hinge creaked, but the inside was cleaner than he expected. The seat covers were old, yet carefully stitched. The steering wheel was worn smooth, shaped by years of hands gripping it. A strange feeling settled in his chest. This car had been used. Loved even. Not abandoned without care. He decided to take it home. Towing it cost more than he was comfortable spending, but something inside him pushed him to do it. When the car finally sat outside his place, neighbors gathered. Some shook their heads. One laughed and asked if it even worked. Another suggested he park it somewhere else so it would not ruin the view. That night, he barely slept. His mind kept returning to the question no one else seemed to ask. Why him? Out of everyone, why was this car left to him? The next morning, he went outside with a cup of tea and sat beside it. In daylight, the flaws were clearer. Rust around the edges. Small dents along the doors. Yet there was something steady about it. It did not feel like junk. It felt like a story that had not been told yet. He began cleaning it slowly. Not to fix it, just to understand it. As he wiped the dashboard, he noticed it had been polished often. The glove compartment opened smoothly, empty except for old papers that meant nothing. The trunk was locked, and the key on the ring did not seem to fit. People passed by and made comments. Some asked why he was wasting time. Others said he should sell it before it fell apart completely. He smiled politely and kept cleaning. As the hours passed, his embarrassment faded. In its place grew a quiet sense of purpose. This was his now. Mocked or not, it belonged to him. And for reasons he could not yet explain, he felt responsible for it. That evening, he noticed something odd. A loose panel near the floor on the passenger side. It did not look broken, just slightly out of place. He pressed it gently. It moved more than it should have. He froze. For the first time since receiving the car, his heart beat faster. He did not pull the panel away. He simply stared at it, wondering how long it had been there, and why no one else had ever noticed. Outside, laughter drifted from down the street. Someone made another joke about the junk car. He closed the door quietly and went inside. Whatever this was, he knew one thing for sure. The car had not been left to him by accident. The next few days passed with the car sitting quietly outside his place, like it was watching him. Every time he stepped out for work or returned home in the evening, his eyes went to it first. He could hear the jokes even when no one was speaking. In his mind, the laughter replayed again and again, reminding him how foolish everyone thought he was for keeping it. He tried to ignore it and focus on his routine: work, meals, sleep. But the thought of the loose panel would not leave him alone. It felt like an unanswered question sitting just outside his door. Each night, he told himself he would check it properly the next day. Each morning, he hesitated. On the fourth day, he finally gave in. It was early, and the street was quiet. He carried a small toolbox with him, though he did not really know what he planned to do. He opened the passenger door and sat on the edge of the seat, staring at the panel near the floor. His hands shook slightly as he touched it again. It came loose more easily than before. Behind it was a narrow space, dark and dusty. At first he saw nothing. Then his fingers brushed against something thin and stiff. He pulled it out slowly. It was an envelope. Old, yellowed and sealed. His name was written on the front in careful handwriting. For a long moment, he could only stare. His breathing grew shallow. This was no accident. This was not random. Someone had put this here on purpose. Someone had wanted him, and only him, to find it. He closed the car door and went inside. Holding the envelope like it might disappear if he let go, he sat at his small kitchen table, turned the envelope over in his hands, and finally opened it. The letter inside was written slowly, with words chosen carefully. It did not rush. It did not explain everything at once. It spoke of regret first, of years lost to silence and pride, of watching from a distance and wanting to say more, but never knowing how. The writer explained that the car was not valuable in money, but in meaning. It had been part of a promise made long ago, a promise to protect something important until the right time came. And the right time, the letter said, was now. As he read, memories he barely remembered began to rise. Short visits, quiet looks, moments that felt awkward back then, but now made sense. The letter explained why the distance had existed, why help had been given quietly, without words or credit. Near the end, the letter asked him for one thing: not forgiveness, not praise, just patience. There was more to discover. His hands rested on the table long after he finished reading. The room felt different, heavier somehow. The car was no longer just an old vehicle. It was a message. A bridge built too late, yet still standing. That evening, he went back outside. The sun was low, painting the car in soft light. For the first time, he did not see rust or damage. He saw effort, care, intent. He began looking more closely. Small markings scratched into metal, areas that had been reinforced, parts that had been replaced quietly over the years. Whoever owned this car before had maintained it with purpose, not appearance. People noticed his change in behavior. He no longer shrugged when they mocked him. He no longer looked embarrassed. When asked why he kept it, he simply said it mattered to him. That answer seemed to confuse them more than any argument could have. A neighbor offered to buy it cheap. He refused. Another suggested he was hiding something. He smiled and said nothing. Late one night, he sat inside the car with the letter folded carefully in his pocket. He ran his hand over the steering wheel and wondered how many decisions had been made while gripping it. How many worries had passed through this space? How many secrets had been carried without a word spoken? The letter mentioned documents, proof, a place where answers waited. He did not know what those answers were yet, but he knew this much: the laughter no longer mattered. Whatever truth the car held, it was bigger than shame, bigger than mockery, and for the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten: anticipation. The car, once dismissed as junk, had become the beginning of something he could not yet name, but knew would change everything. He did not rush after reading the letter. For days, he carried it with him, folded neatly in his pocket. At work, during breaks, even while standing in line at the store, he felt its weight against his chest. It reminded him that something unfinished was waiting. The letter spoke about documents and a place. but it was careful with details. Almost like the writer wanted him to think first, to feel first, before acting. That patience, the letter said, would matter more than speed. One evening, he sat inside the car again, this time with a small notebook. He began writing down everything he noticed. Scratches, numbers, faded stickers on the inside of the windshield. One sticker caught his attention. It was nearly gone, but a date was still visible. It matched a time mentioned in the letter, a time when something important had happened. He followed that lead. The next day, he took time off work and drove to the edge of town, where old buildings still stood like memories no one bothered to erase. According to the letter, the car had once been parked there for months. He walked slowly, reading faded signs, asking a few shop owners if they remembered the place. Most shook their heads. One elderly man paused and said the car looked familiar. He pointed toward a storage building that had been closed for years. The lock was broken, but the door resisted when pushed, as if it had not been opened in a long time. Inside, dust covered everything. Old boxers, broken furniture, forgotten tools. In the corner, he found a small metal cabinet. Inside were papers wrapped carefully in cloth. The documents told a story that no one had ever told out loud. They showed years of quiet effort, money earned honestly and saved slowly, support given to others without credit, decisions made to protect family from mistakes that were never spoken about. The truth was not dramatic. It was not about sudden wealth or hidden power. It was about responsibility, about someone choosing silence over praise. As he read, his throat tightened. He finally understood why the car mattered. It had been the only thing stable through years of movement and change. It carried papers when there was nowhere else to keep them safe. It carried hope when words were too risky. When he returned home, his view of the street felt different. The same people were there, talking, laughing, passing by. But he felt separate now, not above them, not below them, just steady. Someone asked again when he planned to get rid of the car. This time, he said never. That night, he placed the documents carefully back into the car, hidden once more. Not because he was afraid, but because they deserved respect. The letter had not been asking him to show the truth. It had been asking him to carry it. He sat quietly, listening to the soft ticking sound as the engine cooled. For the first time, he felt connected to a past he never knew. The car was no longer an object. It was a lesson, and the lesson was not finished yet. Life did not change all at once after he found the documents. There was no sudden noise, no public moment where everyone stopped and stared. Change came quietly, the way it often does when it is real. It showed up in how he walked, how he listened, and how he responded when people spoke to him. The car remained parked outside his place, but now it looked different to him. He washed it more carefully. He fixed small things he once would have ignored. A loose handle, a weak light. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make it shine. He wanted it strong, not impressive. People noticed at first they assumed he was wasting more time and money. One man asked why he kept repairing something that would never be worth much. He answered calmly that worth was not always about selling. That reply ended the conversation faster than any argument could have. The documents stayed hidden, but their truth worked its way into his daily life. He began helping others the way help had once been given to him. Quietly, without asking for thanks. A small loan to someone in trouble, a ride for someone stranded. Advice offered without judgment. The same people who mocked him before began speaking differently around him, not with praise, but with caution, as if they sensed there was more to him now. Something solid they could not push against. One afternoon, the car finally drew attention for a different reason. It stalled in the middle of the road. Traffic slowed. A few drivers honked. Someone shouted a joke from a window. He stayed calm. He stepped out, lifted the hood, and worked carefully the way he had learned to do over weeks of quiet effort. Within minutes, the engine started again. A few people watched in silence. One even nodded in respect. That small moment mattered more than he expected. Not because he proved anything, but because he felt steady under pressure. The car had taught him that. Later that week, a local official stopped by. Someone had complained about the old vehicle being an eyesore. The official looked it over, expecting a problem. Instead, he found papers in order, repairs done properly, and a vehicle that met every requirement. There was nothing to complain about. Word spread slowly. The jokes faded. Curiosity replaced them. People asked questions now instead of making fun. How old was the car? Where did it come from? Why did he care so much? He answered only what felt right. One evening, a person from the past approached him. Someone who had once spoken the loudest when laughter was easy. This time, the voice was softer. An apology followed. Short, awkward, honest. He accepted it without drama. That night, he reread the letter. Not because he needed answers, but because he wanted to remember the tone of it. The patience, the restraint, the belief that some things grow best when left alone. He realized then that the car had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had filtered people. Those who saw only rust walked away. Those who looked closer stayed. And the story was not finished yet. The truth was getting harder to ignore. The final change came on an ordinary morning. No warning, no crowd, no raised voices. He woke early, made his tea, and sat by the window as he often did. The car stood outside, clean but modest, just as it always had. It no longer felt like a burden or a mystery. It felt like a companion that had walked him to the end of a long road. He took the letter out once more. The paper had softened from use, the folds worn thin. He read it slowly, not searching for new meaning, but letting the words settle the way they were meant to. The writer had trusted him. Not because he was the strongest or the loudest, but because he listened. Because he stayed when others walked away. That trust weighed on him in a good way. Later that day, he drove the car to the edge of town again. Not to the storage building this time, but to a quiet, open space where few people went. He parked, turned off the engine, and sat in silence. The air was still. The moment felt right. He took the documents from their place and reviewed them carefully. They showed a life of steady choices. No shortcuts. No loud success. Just consistency. They explained how support had been given to people when they needed it most, and how repayment had never been expected. The reward had been seeing others stand again on their own. He understood then what the inheritance truly was. It was not the car. It was the responsibility. He did not announce anything. He did not gather people or prove anyone wrong with words. Instead, he did what the letter asked. He continued the quiet work. He helped where help mattered. He listened when others needed to speak. He used what had been protected to protect others in return. Over time, people noticed. Not all at once, but enough. They stopped joking entirely. Some began asking for advice. Others offered help without being asked. The street felt different, calmer, more connected. One afternoon, a child from the neighborhood asked him about the car. Why it looked old but strong. Why he never sold it. He smiled and said, "Some things are meant to last, not to impress." The child nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Years passed gently. The car aged further, but it never failed him. When it finally could not be driven anymore, he did not replace it right away. He kept it where it was, covered and cared for. Like a reminder of where patience can lead, when people spoke of him, they no longer mentioned the junk car. They spoke of reliability, of quiet help, of someone who showed up when it mattered. And that, he realized, was the truth hidden all along. Not every legacy is loud. Some are meant to be carried, and he carried it well. Time moved forward, steady and quiet, the way it always had. He did not mark it with big events or celebrations. Life simply continued, shaped by small choices made day after day. The lessons he had learned did not fade. If anything, they settled deeper into him. The car still rested where he kept it, covered and protected. Though it no longer ran, it remained part of his routine. Some mornings, he would uncover it, wipe away dust, and sit inside for a few minutes. Not to remember the past with sadness, but to stay grounded. It reminded him that patience had once changed everything. People still came to him, though now they came with trust instead of curiosity. Some needed advice about work, others struggled with family matters. He never claimed to have answers. He listened, asked simple questions, and shared what experience had taught him. Often, that was enough. One evening, a letter arrived at his door. There was no return address. Inside was a short note of thanks. Someone he had helped long ago had finally found their footing and wanted him to know. The words were brief but sincere. He folded the note and placed it with the original letter, understanding that this was how the circle continued. He realized then that the inheritance had grown. It was no longer something he carried alone. It lived in actions passed from one person to another, unseen but strong. The street had changed as well. New families moved in. Old faces moved on. Children who once played nearby now walked with confidence toward their own futures. Some waved when they passed him. Some stopped to talk. None of them laughed at the car anymore. To them, it was simply part of the place, like a tree that had always been there. As years went by, his hair began to gray. His steps slowed slightly, but his presence remained steady. He kept his habits simple. Early mornings, honest work, quiet evenings. One day someone asked him what he planned to leave behind. He thought about it carefully. Not money, not objects, not even stories. He answered that he hoped to leave people better than he found them. That answer surprised even him. When he returned home that evening, he uncovered the car one last time and sat inside. The seat felt familiar, shaped by years of stillness and memory. He placed his hand on the steering wheel and closed his eyes. He did not feel regret. He felt complete. The laughter from long ago no longer mattered at all. What mattered was that he had chosen to listen, to carry, and to continue. Some legacies begin with mockery. The strongest ones end in quiet. Strength, the years that followed, did not rush him. They came one by one, each carrying small tests and quiet chances to choose the kind of person he wanted to remain. He had learned that strength did not always show itself in loud moments. Most days, it showed up in routine, in showing up even when no one was watching. He kept working, though his role changed. Younger people came and went, full of energy and plans. He watched them with patience, offering guidance when asked, and space when it was not. He never forced lessons. He believed people learned best when they felt safe enough to make mistakes. The covered car stayed where it was. Some days he uncovered it, some days he did not. When he did, he noticed new marks from time and weather. He did not rush to erase them. They felt honest. They reminded him that nothing useful stays perfect for long. One afternoon, a visitor arrived from out of town. The person had heard about him through quiet stories passed along over time. Not stories of success, but of reliability. The visitor asked if the old car was part of the reason. People trusted him. He thought for a moment and said the car was not the reason. It was the reminder. They sat together for a while, speaking about work, loss, and the fear of choosing wrong. He listened more than he spoke. When the visitor left, there was relief on their face. It's the kind that comes from being heard, as the seasons turned. He began to notice how often people measured life by what they could show. New purchases, new titles, new noise. He did not judge them. He had once believed in those measures too. Now, he measured time differently. He measured it by trust, kept by promises not broken, by help given without record. One winter, the street faced trouble. A storm damaged homes and cut power. People gathered, unsure what to do. He did not wait for instructions. He checked on the elderly, shared supplies, helped clear paths. Others followed, not because he told them to, but because he started. When things settled, someone thanked him publicly. He felt uncomfortable, but he did not stop it. He understood that sometimes gratitude helped others believe in good again. That night, he sat inside the car and felt the quiet hum of memory. He thought about the letter, now fragile with age. He thought about the hands that had written it, the patience behind each word. He realized something important. The letter had not only explained the past, it had prepared him for the future. As time moved on, his health slowed him. Small aches appeared. Rest took longer. He adjusted without complaint. He had learned that resisting change only made it heavier. Younger neighbors offered help. He accepted it with grace. He knew refusing kindness only closed doors. One evening, a child asked him to tell the story of the car. He did not tell the whole thing. He spoke about patience, about listening, about not judging too quickly. The child listened closely, eyes wide, as if these were secrets. In a way, they were. Later that night, he wrote a short note, not a letter full of detail, just a few lines about carrying forward what matters. He placed it with the other papers. Knowing it might be found one day, he did not choose who would find it. He trusted that choice would be made when the time was right. The laughter that once followed the car was long gone. In its place was respect, quiet and steady. People no longer spoke about what he owned. They spoke about how he made them feel. Safe seen. He understood then that the inheritance had grown beyond anything physical. It lived in habits passed along, in choices repeated, in silence honored. When he finally rested that night, he felt no fear of what lay ahead. He had carried what he was given. He had added to it, and he had done so without losing himself. Some stories do not end. They continue in the way people choose to live after the lesson is learned. The days became quieter, but not empty. He learned the difference over time. Quiet no longer meant loneliness. It meant space to think, space to notice things others often missed. The way the light fell across the street in the early morning, the sound of footsteps slowing when someone felt safe enough to pause, the small signs that life was still moving forward, even when nothing dramatic happened. He spent more time walking now. Short walks at first, then longer ones as his body allowed. People greeted him along the way. Some waved from a distance. Some stopped to talk. The conversations were never rushed. No one seemed in a hurry when they spoke to him. That was something new, and it told him more than words ever could. The covered car remained part of the landscape. Newer neighbors asked about it sometimes. They did not mock it. They asked with curiosity, the kind that comes without judgment. He usually answered with a simple smile and said it had been with him a long time. That was enough. One afternoon, a young couple moved into a nearby place. They struggled quietly, the way many people do at the beginning. He noticed the signs because he had lived them once. Late nights. Worry carried in their shoulders. Smiles that tried too hard. He did not interfere. He waited when the moment came. It was small. A short conversation. A shared cup of tea. Advice offered carefully, without pressure. The relief on their faces reminded him of himself years ago. Before the car, before the letter, before understanding. Helping them did not feel like giving something away. It felt like returning something that had once been trusted to him. As seasons passed, he found himself thinking less about the past and more about the present. The past no longer pulled at him. It rested where it belonged. He had carried it long enough to learn from it. One evening, while organizing old papers, he found the short note he had written years earlier, the one meant for someone else, someday. He read it again and realized how much he had grown since writing it. The words were still true, but his understanding of them was deeper now. He added another note. Just a few lines about patience, about listening, about choosing kindness, even when it costs time. He placed it beside the first. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then steady. He watched it from the window, feeling no urge to move. The car sat quietly under its cover, rain tapping gently against it. He realized then, the car had never been the center of the story. He had been, not because he was special, but because he chose to be present. The next day, someone stopped him during his walk and thanked him for something he barely remembered doing. A small favor from years ago. At the time, it had seemed insignificant. To the other person, it had meant survival. He listened, nodded, and accepted the thanks without brushing it away. He had learned that refusing gratitude could be just as harmful as demanding it. That night, he slept deeply. Dreams came not of the past, but of open roads and quiet places, of movement without urgency, of purpose without noise. When he awoke, he felt ready for whatever came next. Even if it came slowly, life did not promise him anything grand. It never had, but it gave him enough, and he knew now that enough, when carried with care, could change more lives than excess ever could. The world around him kept moving, even when his own pace slowed. He noticed things differently now. He noticed how people often rushed past moments that deserved care. He noticed how silence made some uncomfortable and peaceful to others. For him, silence had become a friend. Each morning followed a gentle rhythm. He woke early, not because he had to, but because the quiet hours felt honest. He made his tea, opened the window, and breathed in the air before the street fully woke. These moments felt earned. The covered car still stood nearby, its shape familiar, almost comforting. It no longer carried mystery. It carried memory. New neighbors sometimes asked if it still worked. He would smile and say it had already done its most important work. They did not always understand, but they respected the answer. One afternoon, he was asked to speak at a small local gathering. Not as a guest of honor, but as someone people trusted. He hesitated at first. Standing in front of others was never his goal, but he agreed, knowing that sometimes sharing a quiet truth could help more than silence. He did not tell a dramatic story. He spoke about choices, about how value is often hidden beneath things people ignore, about how patience can protect what noise destroys. People listened. Afterward, a few stayed behind to talk. Some shared worries they had never spoken aloud. He listened, the way he always had. He reminded them that most answers come slowly. That was not a failure. That evening, he sat inside the car again, feeling the worn seat beneath him. He thought about how far the story had traveled without ever leaving this place. The road had been inward, not outward. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. The street changed again. New faces, new sounds. Yet something steady remained. People helped one another more often now. Not because they were told to, but because it had become normal. He saw it in small acts. Someone holding a door, someone checking on a neighbor, someone choosing patience over anger. He understood then that legacy does not belong to one person forever. It spreads when given room. Life brought challenges, as it always does. There were disagreements. There were hard seasons. But now, when problems arose, people faced them together. They remembered to ask before judging, to wait before reacting. The habit spread beyond the street. Visitors noticed it. Friends took it home with them. Small changes traveled quietly, the way the strongest things often do. One evening, during a soft rain, someone uncovered the car briefly to clean beneath it. They worked carefully, as if the car could feel their intention. When they finished, they covered it again and sat for a while, listening to the rain. It felt right. Years passed. Faces changed. Some moved away. New ones arrived. Yet the tone remained. The place did not cling to the past. It honored it by living well. A child who had once asked about the car grew older. They began helping others the way they had been helped. Not loudly, not for praise. Just because it seemed natural one day, that same person placed a new note in the box. It read that they finally understood what patience meant. No. One announced it, someone else read it later and smiled. The car aged, but it did not fade. The cover was replaced again. The space around it was kept clean. Flowers appeared sometimes, other times there was nothing at all. Both felt appropriate. The story continued without needing to be told. Not in headlines, not in speeches, but in the way people chose to slow down, to notice, to care, and somewhere in that steady rhythm, the lesson remained clear. Value is not always visible. Legacy is not always loud. Some truths arrive wrapped in patience. Waiting for those willing to stay, the street stayed, the people stayed, and the quiet strength carried on.